Hi, this tutorial is about how to design and 3D print your own phone case. First, go to the browser and select New Component, and that allows you to build a new component. So we'll name that component, in this case iPhone 6s case, and then select Enter. The next thing is to add some user parameters. So we go up to Modify, and then Change Parameters, and we can add some user parameters for the width, height and depth of the phone. So click on the plus sign, select height, and enter the height of the phone that you want to create, which should be available on the manufacturer's website. And we will do the same again for width, and finally for the depth of the phone. Okay. Next we will insert a new canvas which will allow us to trace the image that we're inserting. So we take the image from something we've downloaded. We're going to use the back of the phone. Select the image, click open, and then we select the plane that image will be on. We have that image lying down, the image appears. Okay. If we zoom in, we can see the image there. We may need to flip the image depending on your image, because the camera on the image we see as we're laying the phone down is on the wrong side. So if we flip the image, we can see the camera is now on the correct side, and click OK. Next we will need to create a new sketch. So we go to Solid Sketch, Create Sketch, and we select the same plane, and this allows us to draw an image. So we will now add a new rectangle, so create rectangle, center point rectangle, and we will go from the center point of the image and we will drag up, and now we use the user parameters that we entered earlier for the height and the width of the object. Let me click Enter, and that has now created an object in the correct size of your phone. If we finish that sketch, we will now want to go on to the browser, select the image under canvases, turn off the sketch, select the image under canvases and calibrate it. Now if we zoom in on the image that we have here, and we click the left side, and then we select the right side on the same plane and type in width, that will scale the image to the appropriate width. So if we now zoom out, we can see the rectangle we created and the image are pretty much the same side. Now if we go over and we edit the canvas, so right click, edit canvas, we can now drag that image around to get it in the right location so we can use it for tracing. Different zoom levels allow different amount of drag, and you can also edit these values manually as well. It should be close, but it doesn't have to be perfect. So here we're going to enter a rough value. And we have the image now centered. So now you can see we want to put rounded corners on. So if we go to Create, Circle, to Tangent Circle, that allows us to select two tangents. So we select the top one and then the bottom one, and then we can drag out a circle to roughly the right size. So we're going to try maybe 9.5 millimeters. If that looks okay, we can now go and add a user parameter for that value. So we change parameters, modify change parameters, add a new user parameter, and we call this corner radius. Okay, 9.5, click OK, and now we can update that first corner. So double click on the value, type in corner radius, and now that is linked to that user parameter. Then modify circle, to tangent circle, and then add in corner radius for the other 3 items. So we now got 4 corners, all at 9.5mm. And the power of user parameters is we select modify, change parameters. We can change this now to 9mm, and it changes all of the associated objects to the same size. So they're now all 9mm. And now we want to turn the sketch back on. If we select all the items in the sketch, so left click and hold down shift and select all the items, we can then go to solid, extrude, and enter the depth value which we have in the user parameters, and that gives us a 3D object of the size of the phone. So it now looks like an iPhone 4. Right, now we want to add in other images. So insert canvas, and we select the image of the side of the phone. So this, we have the volume buttons. So select the image, and then we select the appropriate plane that we want that image on. And then if we zoom in and we select the correct face, we can see the image is in the wrong orientation. So we can rotate that round 90 degrees, but the buttons are on the wrong side, so we can actually flip the image. And if you flip horizontally or vertically, you can eventually get the buttons on the correct side. Click OK. And now once again we want to calibrate it, so go to the browser, select the image, right click and calibrate. And now if we select the edge of the image on one side, and then select the edge of the image on the other side, we can now type in height, because this is the height of the phone, and it will scale the image accordingly. There we go. Now if we zoom out, but if we right click on that image again, so browser image, edit canvas, we can now move that image around like we did before. So we can either drag it or we can enter the values manually, move it up. That looks pretty close, and then click OK. And now we have an image of the side, and we want to do the same again for the bottom. So insert canvas, select the bottom image, select the appropriate plane, select the appropriate face, we can zoom in, and then we want to move the image. And on this side you can notice that the image is flipped, so the 3.5mm jack is on the wrong side, so we want to move that around. So select browser, calibrate, and calibration, and we will now set the width of the bottom image. So left side, right side, enter width, and it enlarges the image accordingly. So now browser, edit canvas, and we can move around that image to the correct location, either by dragging or by selecting the value manually. Now if we go to home, we can see all 3 images are on the appropriate planes and projecting. So if we go to the bottom again, and we can see the curve of the edge of the phone. So if we now go to fillet and select the appropriate edge, and we use depth divided by 2, because on an iPhone 6 it's a full semicircle, so we want to do the depth divided by 2, which will give us a quarter of that half circle, and then do the same on the bottom to give us the other quarter, so we actually end up getting that half circle. So depth divided by 2 again. If we go to home and we zoom in, we can see there's the full semicircle all the way around the outside. If we turn off the canvas, we can see it a lot easier. So we have that iPhone 6 body, and if we rename the sketch according. Now if we add in a new parameter by going to modify and then user parameters and enter case thickness, we can enter the thickness of the case. So in this example, 1.5 millimeters. Select OK, and now we can use something called the shell command. Solid shell, and that allows us to add a shell either inside or outside of the object. So if we select the object itself and then we enter, or we do dimensions, we want to go on the outside on the direction, and we enter the thickness as case thickness. You can see the thickness of the case is added to the body, so it's making the whole object slightly larger. So if we now create a new sketch, and we create that on the plane of the face, not on the same plane, we actually select the face of the object, and I'm renaming it to accordingly, and it's actually going to automatically in this example take the whole plane, so that's good enough for us. So we click finish, and now we want to extrude that plane. So extrude, and we want to do it for minus case thickness, because we want to go down, we don't want to go up, we want to go down, and that would turn it into a cut. And click OK, and now you can see we have the very basic case created. So you can see it's hollow now because we did the shell command. So we're going to turn on the canvases and select the top view, and we're looking down on the camera, and this is where we want to double check that the camera is going to be in the right location. But we create a new solid on the back plane, so actually on the object itself on the back. Renaming the sketch, and then we go to sketch, circle, center circle, click and drag just to draw around where that camera would be, and we want to give it a little bit of an overlap, so we don't need to use a parameter for these. So do the same for the LED flash, and we've got 2 circles. So if we join those up using the line command, we join that up, and then we do the same at the top. So we turn off the canvases, it makes it slightly easier to see. We've now cut out where we want the camera to go. If we select the items to extrude, so we select them all using the left key and left mouse button and the shift, select all those items, and we go to extrude. We now want to go to solid extrude, and we will go to the case thickness, and that's going in the wrong direction, so actually we want to make it minus case thickness, so it's going down. But because of the fillet at the top of the screen, if we do it symmetrically, it will go up and down, and click OK, and it would cut in both directions. So now the camera, otherwise we'd have a little bit of fillet at the top because we'll only be cutting down, and there's some of the solid above it. Select home, and now we want to do the same, so we create a solid, so create a sketch, and we do the normal center plane, and this is for the volume buttons. So we created the new sketch, we turn the canvases on so we can trace and we can zoom in, and because those volume buttons are along the center line, if we go from the pivot and go up by depth divided by 2, so in the center of the thickness of the phone, and then drag a line across, we can use that as a guide for where the locations of the buttons will be. So now I'm going to create another circle using roughly the center point and drag it out, and so we have them all the same size. I'm going to put in 5, and then I do the same again for all of them, so each side of the line is the same. So 5, and then for the top 5 again, and then we use the line to join these circles together. So select that so we can easily create the cutouts. Use the line tool as well for the lock button. Now we want to turn off the canvases, and we're going to want to extrude these items out. So if we get the right plane, and if we tilt the image up slightly, it makes it easier to grab. So we now select all of the items using Shift and the left key, so we can do all of the bits we want to cut out. And then solid extrude, and we want the distance to be the width divided by 2. Okay, width divided by 2, but it's actually going the wrong direction, so minus width divided by 2. And then that's still not enough, so we do minus case, so it actually pokes out the side of the case. And we have cut the volume buttons. So that's the volume and the silent button. So we now create a new sketch on the same plane to cut out the lock button. So the lock button is in the same location as the up volume. So we will use the same depth divided by 2 to get the centre of the phone, and then drag across so we can get it along the same plane. Select the edge, so we were using 5mm, and then drawing the lines. And then finish the sketch, and now we want to, just rename the sketch, we want to extrude that out. So we will now select all the components using the left button and Shift, and extrude, and this will be width divided by 2 plus the case thickness, and it pokes out the side of the case. And now if I turn off the canvases, you can see we now have the lock button extruded. And then the same again for doing the USB and speaker and 3.5mm jack. So select the plane, depth divided by 2, create a line, and then just draw around all of the items that we want to have cut out. I'm doing various widths for each of these just to make them look better, because they're not joined, it doesn't matter. Please be aware for 3D printing that you can't really do overhangs particularly well. So if we turn off the sketch, we will now select all the items, and we will extrude that once we've selected them all. It's made slightly more complicated by having the line going across, because that cuts some of these items in half. So we go to solid extrude, and that will be height divided by 2. But actually we want it going the other direction, so it's minus height divided by 2 plus minus the case thickness. And there we go, we've now taken the USB holes for the USB and the bottom ports. So that is the main case. So it's always a good idea to save the model. So we're just going to save that model for us. And we're now going to change some, add in new parameter, and this will be for the fillet. So we want to make it look a little bit nicer, so we'll add a fillet to all the items. So we will select the items we want to fillet, and that would just round off some of these corners. This isn't necessary, this is just to make it look slightly nicer, but whether you can see it on a 3D print is dubious. So select all the ones we want to fillet and we use that same value, and we can change that value later if we decide. And finally we want to save the item as an STL, so browser, save as STL, just click OK and select the name to save it as, click save, and it will save it to the appropriate directory. And now it can be brought into your slicing software, so I'm using Process Slicer, drag that item in, and there's a phone case we designed. In Process Slicer it's really easy to add in different layer changes, so we can drag down and we can select the appropriate layer that we want to change the filament at. So that's, for me, changing from PETG to TPU, and then we send that to the printer. During printing, make sure that you change the filaments accordingly. I use Ninja Flex TPU, which needs to be printed really slowly but does give excellent results. And I hope that that should give you everything you need to print your own case.